Some games just do not let go of your brain. Doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter how many newer games came out after them, you boot them up thinking you'll play for maybe an hour and suddenly it's 2 in the morning and you're Googling lore videos or replaying missions or telling yourself, okay, one more chapter. Some games age, some games become time capsules, and then there are the ones that still feel alive. Hello and welcome to Ranked Up. Today on this video, we're talking about 15 legendary single-player games that will still completely hook you in 2026. Starting off this list, it's the Order 1886. Look, I know, I remember the discourse around this game. It's short, it's got more QTEs than a David Cage joint, and the black bars on the screen are so thick you could land a plane on them. But here's the thing nobody wanted to admit back in 2015. It absolutely rules. You wake up in 2026, you've played every open-world bloatfest known to man, and you just want something tight and gorgeous. This is it. The gunplay is heavy, the thermite rifle is one of the coolest weapons ever put in a shooter, and the Victorian London steampunk vibe is immaculate. It's basically a playable Netflix miniseries, a miniseries where you fight werewolves and vampires using Tesla coils. Sir Galahad with a machine gun. You can't tell me that doesn't sound fun after 10 years of procedurally generated survival crap. It's on PS4 and PS5 via backwards compatibility, and you can probably find it for the price of a sandwich. Does it overstay its welcome? No, because it literally ends as soon as it starts. But man, what a beautiful 5 hours it is. And next up we have Ryse, Son of Rome. For a game that got clowned on for years, people sure do keep reinstalling it. And I kind of get it. You fire this thing up expecting some shallow Xbox One launch gimmick, and then suddenly you're knee-deep in hyper-violent Roman warfare with one of the crunchiest shield bash combat systems ever made. Is it repetitive? Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna see a lot of the same animations. But there is something hypnotic about the rhythm of the combat, the sound design, the weight of the hits, the way enemies collapse after executions. It scratches some weird action game part of your brain. And visually, Christ, it still holds up. Crytek was out there making everybody else's launch games look unfinished. We've seen a lot of players revisit it recently and kind of realized that maybe critics judged it too harshly because everybody expected some revolutionary next-gen experience instead of just a really solid cinematic action game. Not everything needs to reinvent gaming. Sometimes you just want to feel like an angry Roman demigod smashing through barbarians for 7 hours. And honestly, Ryse still nails that better than almost anybody. Next on the list, it's Quantum Break. Remedy Entertainment is on an absolute tear these days, but it's easy to forget the weird, incredibly ambitious experiment they pulled off with this one. It was half third-person shooter and half actual live-action TV show starring Hollywood actors. And at the time, people didn't really know what to make of the structural whiplash. But going back to it now, you can clearly see the exact DNA that allowed them to make absolute masterpieces down the line. The time-bending combat is where the game completely wins you over because you're not just hiding behind low walls, you're literally freezing bullets in midair, dashing across the room in a blink, and creating localized time distortions to blow groups of enemies away. The gunplay can feel a little loose, and the live-action episodes are definitely a product of their time. But the sheer creativity on display is something you just don't see from big-budget studio projects anymore. It's an incredibly cool sci-fi puzzle that deserves way more credit than it got. Now next up we have Final Fantasy 15. The conversation around this one has taken a really fascinating turn over the last couple of years, especially when you compare its laid-back, character-focused energy to the much more linear structure of the newer entries in the series. This is essentially the ultimate gaming road trip, a story about a prince and his 3 best friends driving a ridiculously luxurious car across a massive world, stopping to camp, cook meals, and take pictures. The overarching plot is famously messy because of its incredibly troubled development history. But the actual bond between the core cast is some of the best writing Square Enix has ever done. The real-time combat lets you warp strike across battlefields and team up for massive cooperative attacks that look spectacular. And the definitive edition fills in a lot of the gaps that frustrated players at launch. It's a game that lets you just exist in its world at your own pace, and that makes the emotional ending hit like an absolute freight train when the journey finally comes to a close. And coming in next, we have The Walking Dead Season 1. Look, I should not be the only one who cried. I want you to cry as well. We all remember sitting there in 2012, staring at the screen, trying to decide if we should steal the food from the car or when we had to make the choice about duck. But the reason this game still hooks you isn't just nostalgia, it's the pacing. Telltale might have run their formula into the ground eventually, but here it was lightning in a bottle. Lee and Clementine. The voice acting, the fact that the game doesn't care if you like it or not. You have to make horrible decisions in real time, and the timer punishes hesitation. The art style is cel-shaded, which means it doesn't look old the way a Call of Duty from that era does. It's ageless. And look, Skybound has kept the lights on. Even the mobile ports got stability updates recently. If you want to remember why the walking simulator genre took over the world for a decade, or if you just want a good cry on a Sunday afternoon, this is the one. Keep that hair short. So next up we have Batman Arkham Origins. For the longest time, this was unfairly treated as the unloved stepchild of the Arkham franchise because it wasn't made by Rocksteady, but the community consensus has shifted hard toward giving it the respect it always deserved. This is a younger, much more brutal Batman who is still viewed as a myth by the police, trapped in a sowy, incredibly atmospheric Gotham City on Christmas Eve, while 8 of the world's deadliest assassins try to collect a bounty on his head. The boss fights in this game are arguably the absolute best in the entire series, with the Deathstroke encounter specifically being a legendary test of counter-timing and martial arts choreography that the main trilogy never quite matched. It uses the exact same rock-solid free-flow combat and predator mechanics you already love, but wraps it in a raw, angry narrative that gives you a completely different look at Bruce Wayne's early career. If you skipped this one because of the launch reviews, you missed out on a phenomenal Batman story. So up next, it's Max Payne 3, Rockstar 2012, the bald head, the airport level. This is a man whacked out of his mind on uppers, downers, and screamers. If you haven't played this in a decade, you probably just remember the bullet time and the cutscenes that flash text on the screen. But replaying it now, it's shocking how good the gunplay still feels. It's weighty. When Max hits the ground in a dive, he stays there. It's not floaty like Call of Duty, it's visceral. And the story? It's the most miserable, cynical, alcoholic noir story Rockstar ever wrote, and it's brilliant. Also, for the PC players, there's a massive update from April 2025 that made it work better on modern systems, and all the DLC is free now. The multiplayer is dead, but who cares? The single-player campaign is a masterclass in escalation. You start in a dingy nightclub in New Jersey and end up tearing apart an airport in Sao Paulo. It's relentless, it's loud, and it's probably the last time Rockstar made a pure shooter this tight before they went all in on the Red Dead engine. Coming in next, we have BioShock Infinite. Okay, I know this one starts arguments now. Every time Infinite comes up, somebody wants to debate the story or the ending or the politics or blah, blah, blah. Whole other conversation. The point is, the game is still insanely compelling to actually play through. Colombia remains one of the coolest settings ever built for a shooter. Floating cities should not feel this believable, and yet somehow they do. Walking through those early sections still gives you that wow factor. And Elizabeth remains one of the best companion characters in gaming because she actually feels useful instead of annoying. She tosses you ammo, reacts to the world, comments on things naturally, and over time the relationship between her and Booker becomes the thing dragging you through the game. Combat gets chaotic as hell later on, sometimes maybe too chaotic honestly, but using skyhooks to fly around arenas while dimensional tears explode open around you still feels unique. Also, the soundtrack choices? Incredible. Infinite has flaws. Big ones. But once it gets its hooks in you, you basically mainline the entire thing in 2 days. That's a legendary game, whether internet discourse likes admitting it or not. Next on the list, it's Mirror's Edge. DICE made a game in 2008 that focused entirely on first-person parkour with a hyper-minimalist, stark white art style punctuated by bright slashes of primary colors. And it still looks like it was made yesterday. There are no cluttered UI elements, no open-world map icons screaming for your attention, just the pure kinetic rhythm of maintaining your momentum across the rooftops of a totalitarian city. When you get into the zone, vaulting over pipes, sliding under fences, and wall running across gaps, the sense of speed and physical presence is unmatched. The forced combat sections are still pretty clunky, to be fair, but the game is at its absolute best when you just ignore the enemies and focus entirely on the fluid line of your movement. It's a timeless piece of game design that proved you don't need a massive weapon wheel to create an exhilarating action game. And up next, let's talk about Gears of War 4. Look, Gears 5 was great, but Gears 4 is the one you go back to if you just want that classic, meaty, two guys with Lancer rifles hiding behind a waist-high wall energy. It's the soft reboot with the new cast, JD, Kate, and Del. And while the story is a little safe, the gameplay is the tightest the franchise has ever been. But here's the secret, the PC version. The Coalition did something incredible. They added vertical split-screen co-op on PC. Do you know how rare that is? Almost no PC games let you play split screen on a monitor, but Gears 4 lets you rotate your screen 90 degrees and play full screen multiplayer campaign with a friend sitting next to you. If you have a Steam Deck or a high-end PC, you can crank this game to Ultra and watch the locusts explode in 4K. It's nostalgia for a time when games were just about shooting things in the face with a chainsaw gun. Sometimes that's all you need. Next on the list, we have infamous Second Son. Man, this game made being a superhero feel cool in a very specific PS4 era way. And yeah, I know people always compare it to the first two Infamous games, but honestly, Second Son still has some of the most fun traversal powers ever put into an open-world game. Turning into smoke and blasting across rooftops never gets old. The neon powers are even better. There's something about sprinting through Seattle, leaving glowing light trails everywhere that still feels stylish as hell. And Deltaman as a protagonist works because he actually feels like a reckless idiot who suddenly got powers and immediately started doing dumb stuff with them. Which, fair enough, honestly. The story's uneven, some of the side content gets repetitive, but none of that really matters once the movement and combat loop clicks into place. You just start bouncing around the city, causing absolute chaos for hours. Also, visually, the particle effects still hold up incredibly well. Sucker Punch knew exactly how to make powers feel flashy without becoming unreadable messes. One of the best comfort food superhero games ever made. And next up, it's Metro Exodus. This is the absolute peak of immersive, atmospheric survival shooters, taking the claustrophobic terror of the underground tunnels and blowing it out into a series of massive, sandbox environments across a post-apocalyptic Russia. The game completely discards traditional user interface elements, forcing you to physically pull out a map and a compass to check your bearings, manually wipe mutated sludge off your gas mask, and look at the watch on your wrist to see how much filter time you have left. Every single piece of equipment requires maintenance, meaning your weapons will jam mid-fight if you don't clean the dirt out of them at a workbench, and ammo is so incredibly scarce that every encounter becomes a tense calculation of risk versus reward. It's a beautifully quiet, incredibly dangerous journey where the world feels completely alive and hostile, forcing you to slow down and truly inhabit the space. So next on the list, it's Rise of the Tomb Raider. You know, I still think this is the best game from the reboot trilogy. Yeah, I said it. Shadow has cool tombs, and the 2013 game has the strongest survival vibe, but Rise hits the best balance overall. Lara finally feels confident without becoming invincible. The exploration opens up more, and the tombs actually feel substantial again. That's the big thing, actual puzzle tombs. You know, the thing Tomb Raider should probably have. Climbing through ancient ruins while everything collapses around you still rules, and the pacing is excellent. The game constantly rotates between stealth, combat, puzzles, exploration, crafting, story beats, all without overstaying anything. Also, Lara herself became way more likable here. Less constant suffering, more actual adventurous energy. Though don't worry, she still falls down cliffs every 15 minutes because apparently gravity has personal beef with this woman. The snowy Siberia setting also gives the whole game this great isolated atmosphere. Honestly, if somebody asked me for a single-player adventure game recommendation in 2026, this would still be near the top of the list. And next up, we have Batman Arkham Knight. Rocksteady poured an almost terrifying amount of detail into their final Dark Knight simulator, and the visual presentation of a rain-soaked Gotham City still routinely humiliates games built exclusively for current hardware. The glide mechanics are so incredibly refined that you can traverse the entire city without ever touching the ground, diving from the clouds to build up speed before pulling up into a smooth, sweeping arc across the skyline. The free-flow combat is at its absolute mechanical peak here, incorporating environmental takedowns, dual-character team attacks, and gadget variations that turn every encounter into a beautiful, flowing dance of martial arts perfection. The Batmobile sections are still a bit divisive because the game forces you into a lot of mandatory tank battles, but the sheer polish of the overall package makes it an absolute must-play single-player milestone. And finally, we have Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Look, we just had the 10-year anniversary of this game. Yeah, this game is already 10 years old. And I will argue until I'm blue in the face that this is still the best-looking action game ever made. The Legacy of Thieves collection on PS5 and PC is unbelievable. The rope swinging, the climbing, the slide down the mud into the marketplace in Madagascar, it's all perfect. But the reason it hooks you in 2026 isn't the graphics, it's the story. It's watching Nathan Drake lie to his wife, then watching him go on one last adventure with his brother, and the game actually sticking the landing. That ending with the pirate swords and the sunset, it's a perfect send-off. In a world of live service nonsense and battle passes, Uncharted 4 is a reminder that games can just be about character and spectacle. It respects your time, it respects your intelligence, and it gives you a satisfying conclusion. It doesn't get better than this. If you only play one game from this list, play this one. It's a masterpiece. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, thanks for watching and see you on the next one.